Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Manchetti and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. A snack tax on sugary and salty food is proposed to help improve the nation's health.
Good morning. The report also calls for better education about how our food's produced and where it comes from. So I'm on the farm this morning in Leeds looking at what it could mean for farmers.
The Spanish islands of Ibiza, Mallorca and Menorca moved back to the amber list 2 weeks after going green.
Good morning. Golf's oldest major is back in pursuit of the Claret Jug at the 149th Open. The gates have just opened at Royal St George's with 32,000 fans allowed per day. The first golfers tee off in just half an hour.
And we'll reveal the total amount raised for Children in Need's 2020 campaign.
Plus, it's a dry since Swithin's Day, so will it last for the next 40 days? Well, I've at least got the prospects for the next 5 coming up here on Breakfast.
Good morning. It's Thursday, the 15th of July. Our top story this morning is a call for sugar and salt taxes to be introduced in England to improve the nation's health.
A landmark report commissioned by the government says the money raised by the levy should be used to extend the free school meals programme and pay for GPs to prescribe fruit and vegetables. Ellie Price has more.
It's just what the doctor ordered, but not what you might expect. Kathy runs the charity Care Merseyside, involved in what's called social prescribing. Patients are referred by their local GP and then offered things like exercise support and cooking advice. Here, they also provide healthy food to low-income families.
From the point of referral, we assess a person's needs, we assess what it is they need support with, and we offer them various range levels of support. So what our aim to do is to reduce GP consultations, to reduce hospitalisations, and to try and tackle in a holistic way how to help people improve their health and well-being.
Maureen's got a number of physical and mental health issues and has used the local prescribing service in different ways. Today's report recommends the government tries out projects like this across the country with the aim to improve people's health and reduce the cost to the NHS of treatment.
I try not to get emotional, but I find it very difficult to manage if we had an ideal amount of fruit and veg in our diet. It would be easier to create stuff, I suppose, that was easy to eat. You need variety, and it's the variety that costs. I could pay for it, but it means something else has to go. And it means we go in the red instead of staying in the black. And I can't cope with the worry of being in the red.
Today's report says a poor diet contributes to 64,000 deaths every year in England alone and costs the economy an estimated £74 billion. There's an environmental impact too. Global food production is the second biggest contributor to climate change. The report recommends a tax on sugary and salty foods. If producers don't change their recipes to use less, it could mean a price increase of 15 to 25% for desserts, biscuits and sweets. The report also calls for food education in schools to be taken more seriously. That's exactly what Andrew Hartshorn, a teacher in Coventry, is already trying to do. And by the way, his students don't say yes sir, they say oui chef.
This has got to be a sustained effort with lots of support across the country, support in the classroom, helping fund ingredients, ensuring its place on the curriculum, ensuring its place on the timetable is safeguarded. It needs to be supported for our parents at home so they're able to access ingredients.
The National Food Strategy estimates its recommendations would cost around £1.4 billion a year and bring in up to £3.4 billion a year in tax revenue. For the report's author, the cost of doing nothing would be terrible damage to the environment and to our bodies. Ellie Price, BBC News.
Government has defended the decision to put Mallorca and Ibiza on the amber list for travel just 2 weeks after they were moved to green.
It means that from Monday morning, most holiday makers returning to the UK from the Spanish islands will have to isolate for 10 days unless they are fully vaccinated. Andrew Walker has more.
A warm Mediterranean beach is a tempting prospect for many after more than a year of restrictions. Some saw the Spanish Balearic Islands as an appealing choice for a summer getaway. But the changes announced by the government will cause problems for some, like Mehdi, who's due to fly to Mallorca at the weekend.
I've had one vaccine 3 weeks ago, And I know from Monday, people who are double vaccinated don't need to quarantine when they return from amber list countries. However, I will need to quarantine. Obviously, that's not great for mental health, but I'm very lucky I can work from home.
Infection rates have doubled on the island since they were added to the Green Watch list just over 2 weeks ago. The government's traffic light system puts countries with the least severe COVID situations into the green category. No quarantine is required for returning travellers. Bulgaria and Hong Kong are being added. Then there's the Green Watch list, which is a warning that the country is at risk of moving to the next category, which is amber. Adult travellers have to quarantine for 10 days, though from Monday that will no longer apply to those who are fully vaccinated. Many young people aren't, so they will be affected as the Balearic Islands move to amber. And for red list countries, quarantine in a special hotel is required. 4 countries, including Indonesia and Cuba, are being added. And from the government, a warning that further changes to the lists are possible.
I think we all know by now that travelling at the moment is not the same as it was before there was a global pandemic, and it does mean that when people book, particularly if you're booking to a green watch list country, you need to make sure you can get your money back, you need to make sure you can rebook your accommodation whenever required.
The changes come into force at 4 a.m. on Monday. They will also apply in Wales and Scotland. Northern Ireland is expected to follow suit, though it will be a further week before the amber list exemption from quarantine for fully vaccinated adults applies there. Andrew Walker, BBC News.
Scientists are warning that the NHS could be pushed to breaking point this winter by the threat from 3 respiratory viruses, including COVID.
A report from the Academy of Medical Sciences says action is needed now to prevent that. It calls for extra staff and capacity in the health service. Here's our health correspondent, Catherine Burns.
Empty streets and deserted stations. Lockdown was our first defence in the pandemic as people stayed at home to stop COVID spreading. At the same time, it prevented us catching other viruses too. But as we're about to ease into something closer to life as normal, researchers are worried that we could see a resurgence in flu cases this winter. A reasonable worst-case scenario would be about 2 times more cases than normal, enough to potentially see tens of thousands of extra deaths. They're also concerned that the burden from RSV, another virus that often affects children and the elderly, could double too. Winter is always a pressurised time for the NHS, and that's before considering COVID and the record backlog of patients waiting for treatment. But researchers say much depends on what we do between now and then. So, as well as COVID, they're calling for tests for flu and RSV at the same time, arguing that the technology exists, it's just a question of logistics.
It's very important to be able to identify when you've got several different viruses transmitting at the same time, which one it is that people have got. And if you can do that, of course, you can look after them better.
Another recommendation is to prioritise vaccines, whether for COVID, any possible booster jabs in the autumn, or flu vaccines for anyone who's eligible. The report also stresses the importance of making sure people can afford to isolate if they're infected. But there's a lot of focus too on what people can do to help themselves and others. Because the steps we've taken to protect ourselves from COVID, like masks, social distancing and fresh air, can only help with other respiratory viruses too. Catherine Burns, BBC News.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.